In this series, I'm going to show you how to make a professionally made, game-ready asset, starting with Marvelous Designer, resculpting high-resolution details in ZBrush, retopology in Maya, texturing in Substance Painter, and then finishing off in Unreal. Welcome to the final part 4. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome to part 4 if you've made it this far. So what we're going to go through is more just setting up a project, getting our textures out of Substance Painter, getting the mesh into Unreal, and then how I would usually set up a shader network, and then we can just look dev the jacket inside of Unreal so we can present it and anything else we want to do with it. So first thing I want to do here is just go into, obviously, Epic, install the engine that you want, and then launch. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with a blank scene, so we can actually just do everything from scratch. Okay, so this is Unreal started up with the blank scene in there. So the reason that I wanted to start this first before we exported our textures is because I wanted to create this file structure. So this is the Unreal content folder. So what I want to do is I want to export our textures and our meshes straight into here. I'll just show you how the connection works. So if I put this in here and put in mesh, you'll see it creates it. So this is just a mirror of here. And what we want to do is create the connection between Substance Painter and here by setting these locations as our export. That way, it's going to be a lot easier for when we're making changes and iterating, that we literally just click export from Substance Painter and it goes straight into here and then automatically updates inside the scene. I'll add a couple of extras in there for now because I know that I'm going to be using them later. So let's put a materials in there. So now if we jump over to Substance Painter, we can export straight into here. File, we can export the mesh, don't triangulate, export, and jump over to our section that we created before. So in content, there's our mesh. Just save that there. Nice. Okay, now we want to do the textures. So we want to go file, export textures. Okay, so we want to set our folder to the same location. So textures in there, cool. So now our textures are going to be shooting straight to our project folder for the jacket inside of Unreal. There's our UE5 template from before that we made. Set that in there. PNG, let's just change it to Targus for now. And then you can see base color, normal, and packed. Our packed map is from before, and we're going to go through that when we jump into Unreal. So if we hit export, and then we jump into our Unreal project, it'll go, hey, something happened here. Do you want to import them? And you want to click don't ask again. So every time we export a new set of textures, it'll just automatically update in there. So we can click import. So with the mesh, what we want to do is we want to combine it to one because we've got the two separate meshes. Sorry, we've got the zipper and we've got the jacket. So we just want to combine it as one. If we type in combine static meshes, click import. So now our jacket is just one mesh with the material because all of our textures are on the one set. So that's perfect. One of the first things we want to do before we start building our material is just adjusting those textures that we brought in. So cool, we can see they're in there and they look great. Our packed map, we want to change. You'll probably notice if you've ever worked in Unreal before and you bring in a black and white information map, whether it's roughness or specular or metallic, the object inside of Unreal looks really wet and way shinier than it should be. It's because you need to turn off sRGB inside the texture. So just double click it, open it up, type in RGB, untick this box here. What I might do when I bring it in and apply all the textures, I'll just show you an example of it on and off, and I can show you what the difference looks like. Okay, to start bringing in our material, we don't want to bring it into this base level here. What we want to do is create our own level so that we can set up different cameras in it and have different sequences and just be generally a little bit more organized. So what we can do is we just, in content, you can also make like a levels folder in here if you want, but I usually just like to put my levels inside the content folder here. So if you just right click and click level, call it like render one. And I usually like to break up my renders depending on the levels and then having corresponding sequences to it, but we'll get into that in a sec. Basically what we want to do is just click that, save all the stuff that we imported. Yep, cool. And it's going to be a completely blank scene. So if I move up, you can see there's nothing here. So we've got nothing in here. Let's bring our mesh in, and we're probably not going to be able to see anything because it's completely black in here. Let's frame where it is. I'll just hit F there to frame it up. Okay, cool. So this is where the transform area over here is really good because, we can't really see the grid or we can't see where we're up to, zero all this stuff, but we want to be able to put a light in there so that we can see it. So if we just go up here to quickly add and then go lights, rect light is going to be your best friend. Let's just rotate this down. We don't need to light it properly for now. Let's just bring it up so we can see what's going on. And just to navigate around the scene, I'm just holding the right mouse button and WASD like you would with a video game. Clicking on an object and hitting F is great. Also, if you've if you're in a scene and it has a bunch of icons and decals and stuff that you don't want to see, hitting G will turn everything off. So it's just what you can see. And G's game mode, so what you see in the game and what you don't. So G is just that toggle there. Let's get another light going. I'm just holding Alt and dragging will duplicate it, and then your WER is your standard move, scale, rotate. Now we can at least see what's going on. Now let's start creating our materials. So when you bring in a mesh, it automatically comes in with a material. This is what would be called a master material. This is sort of like a manual hard-coded way of doing materials. What we want to do is create a material instance so that we can adjust a bunch of stuff in the scene, and let's just build one of those from scratch. So now I can use this as a base, you know, I may as well, but all I'd be doing is clicking right click and go material, and then if I called it jacket, we'd ultimately be in the same place. So I'm just going to get rid of that, and we're going to start with the one that's already in there. So what we want to do is add in areas for us to put our textures in. So let's get rid of this for now, and I'm going to hit tab, and then I'm going to hit texture sample, copy, paste. We want to put in these into the areas, you know, that they would obviously correspond to. Our packed map is going to be a little bit tricky. So these are kicking back with areas because there's no images in them. So if we want to click onto here, the way that you would usually build a master material is that you would put sort of like a dummy texture in here. So it's just basically telling the material, hey, this is where a texture goes. But in this case, we're just going to use the textures that we've got. So if we go over to our texture slot here, we can just drag in. So if we click out this texture sample, which will be our base color, this is where the properties for that are. We can drag this in and automatically that error is gone. But what we want to do is make these usable. So we'll do that in a sec. We'll go through and just drag these in, drag him in, hit save. All right, just like that, we're already getting somewhere. So this is going to be our packed map. So drag him in. So metallic was red, roughness is green, occlusion. These lights are really kicking, hey. Let's move some of these back. We need some bounce in here. Create shapes, basic, plain. Nice. Okay, so if we want to go to our material, all right, we're getting somewhere already. But say we wanted to change these material properties inside this scene here. So what we could do is create a material instance from this. Basically what this is doing is where we build our control, and let's just do that straight off the bat with something easy. Like say we wanted to adjust the roughness in here. So our roughness is our green channel. So what we want to do is add in a multiplier. And this is just using some simple math. Okay, so we're going to put it into here. So this is the multiplier saying, hey, we're getting our roughness information from here, putting that into there. And right now it's set at 1. And so 0 to 1, 1 being, okay, everything you've given me, and 0 being, we're canceling out the roughness. So shortcut here is if you hold 1 and then click, you'll get this constant node. So this is basically what controls numerical values inside of here. And I use them for everything, because they're really easy to set parameters as far as, you know, I want a lot of something or I want less of something. So I use these a lot. So that's just holding 1 and then clicking. And if you drag this into B, so what you can see here already is look how wet that is. So right now that's saying we're not going to be using any roughness value now. So if I hit save, our roughness is completely gone and it's just basically wet. So if I crank this back to 1, we're back to where we were before. So this is great, but we don't want to keep adding in numbers and then hitting save and then checking. We want to be able to do all this on the fly and basically create a master material that can control everything. What we want to do is right click on this and convert it to a parameter, and we want to call it exactly what it is. We'll get our roughness there and we'll hit save. Let's convert these to parameters too. So say we wanted to change these, we wanted to add this material to other things and swap it out, convert it to a parameter. Let's call it what it is, diffuse, and we'll convert this one to a parameter. That's the packed map, and that's the normal map. Okay, so now we have 4 different controllable parameters in here, our textures and our roughness. Now you can obviously go crazy with this, adding in levels of color control and saturation and brightness, but let's just work with these for now so that we can prove the point. So what we want to do is create a material instance and then assign it to this object here. So I can click out of this because that's saved. We're going to right click on that, and then we want to go create material instance. I usually like to MI for material instance, and then this would be M. So if I double click this, you can automatically see if I open two of these and put them side by side, very different interfaces. So think of this like an under the hood type setup. Like this is everything that you want to set up so you don't have to look at it ever again. And then the material instances basically make life easier. So because they iterate in real time in the scene, which is exactly what we want. So let's have a look at the parameters that we just created. So if I drop these open, you'll see this. I'll just get this open so we can put them side by side. This section here, global texture parameter, are these. Say we called this material clothes, and we wanted to use this material master for a shirt, a pants, any other part of clothes that used this master material setup. And all we would need to do then is bring in our textures for those things and drop them into here, and then call these off different instances. So it's basically a way of creating, a master hierarchy setup, and then not needing to look at it until you need it again. So the other parameter that we had was our roughness. So this was our other little parameter that we built. With this, now I can scale it up and scale it down. And as you can see, it's not doing anything in the scene because it's not assigned. So what we want to do is, there's a difference between assigning a material for an object in the scene and actually in the static mesh itself. So what I want to do is actually add this in the mesh. See, if I open up this asset, you can see the material is associated with it, not the material instance. I'm doing this the hard way because I can just drag this in. Now we have our material instance associated with our jacket. So I can put my master material in the masters so I don't get them confused. So now I've just got our little material instance here. Open him up and say I wanted to just see how our roughness slider is working. Looks like it's working pretty well. And there's a really simple basic master and material instance setup. Now let's set up some renders. So before we set up our render sequence, I just want to add in a post-process volume into here. So if you're not familiar with the post-process volume, what that does is it's basically like an in-scene render setting that controls a lot of the lighting samples and different elements of the renders, as well as the visual side that we can see in the viewport. Post-process volume, it's going to add one of those to the scene. When you bring it into the scene, it only does what's inside this box. So what you need to do is infinite extend unbound, which basically means control the whole scene, not what's inside this little box. And I'll give you an example of why the post-process volume is great to have in the scene. So we can control a whole bunch of different elements inside of here, like our exposure. We can add in effects like chromatic aberration, image effects, lens flares, and then just a whole bunch of different color grading and different things like that. The main thing I like to use this for is for the path tracing. So if we were to do a path tracing setup, so let's just have a look and see what that looks like now. It is that toggle as well. Like I said before, we can hit G, just get rid of everything. When we use path tracing, it's going to give somewhat of a different look. There could potentially be some errors or things that look the way that you don't want it to look. Straight off the bat, usually I notice these, jaggy sort of like alternate on and off. See how it just renders there a little bit differently. So I'll show you how to fix those in case you have any of those issues. First thing we can do is go to Nanite and turn off this Nanite. I've already turned it off from before, so I know that's not the problem. So we've turned that off. The other thing is the source angle of the lights. So it needs a larger area of bounce when we're going to be using path tracing. So let's use this light for example. So what we want to do is actually just crank up the source width and source height. It's not going to change the look of the intensity of the light, but it is going to change you can see here, let's go through all these. See how you have like those sharp shadows there, and if I just crank that up, they're all gone, just like that. Now if we wanted to control our path trace settings, we go into our post-process volume, we type in path, and here's all our path trace settings. So this little bar here, this is going to change depending on what settings we put here. So if I put this max bounces to 1 and samples per pixel, let's call it 64, see how quick that shot up? So let's just put this at 12, and then this is good for like look deving and stuff. See how I can fly around really easily, and only until we're doing a final render would we want to crank this up. And even still, we can just drive that from our actual sequencer. So this is really good for, you know, finding what works and finding a nice balance between the scene and what you're looking at. So yeah, everything is usually controlled from this post-process volume here. All right, so let's start getting some renders out. So in our content folder, let's right click and then go to cinematics and then go to level sequence. And just like we did with the level, let's call it something similar. And then these two obviously would be corresponding. Okay, so in the sequencer, what we want to do is put in the things that we're going to be using in the sequencer. So our mesh, which is going to be one of them. We'll drag him in case we want to do, you know, we're going to do some kind of a turntable or something. And the other thing is the camera. So we want to add in, go up to quick add, cinematic, cine camera actor. Toggle G, so we can make sure we can see what we're looking at. Just crank him up so it's a bit easier to see. So this is good. Yeah, see how there was a exposure issue there? We'll fix that in a sec. You'll see the exposure compensation. Yeah, so what we want to do is turn that off, because I'm actually not the biggest fan of that. I like to be able to have full control of it. So just firstly, let's drag him in. So we've got our camera in there. This little button here jumps you to the camera. So what we want to do is turn off that auto exposure. So if I click this, I can also pin our camera here, which is also a good little tip. So if we go to project settings and you just type in auto exposure, you can turn that off. So we don't want, you know, adjusting our exposure for us, which also means this is back to an area where we don't want it to be. So that's also why the post-process volume comes in handy, so that, you know, we've got this to control our exposure now. So if we go to exposure, yeah, let's just put it on auto exposure basic and then set that to around 5 would be fine. I think the thing that matters the most is what we want is our viewport and our camera to be the same. And if we turn off auto exposure, that's not going to be affecting that anymore. So that's a good place to start. So if we jump to our camera using the quick jump button here in our sequencer, we can unpin this now that we're in it. What I want to do is just position this. Let's add some depth of field to this. So if we go into our focus settings and then manually adjust the focus, what we can do is actually click on the object that we want to focus on using this dropper. So click the dropper, click the object. Cool, we're not really going to see any changes until we adjust a couple more things. So if we go down to the aperture, so the aperture is going to be the thing that drives the focus. So if you can actually check where the focus plane is by clicking this here. So you can see that's actually where it's referencing the focus from, and that will change, you know, depending on where we click with our focus dropper, but around there should be good. The focal length and the aperture working together are going to be the two things that adjust our focus. So if we put it at, you know, a reasonable focal distance, let's put it on path tracing so we're starting to look a little bit more like what it's going to look like. You can already see that blurriness there is going to be a bit of a problem, so we're going to have to fix that. What we need to do is go below that. So there's minimums and maximums on the focus lens settings. So if you got minimum f-stop, so the f-stop min and max is your aperture. So if we can set this to, let's just say the minimum is 0 for now. And if we go down to current aperture, just dial in. So like I said before, if we change this, say to 90, and then move our camera, but if we jump out of our camera and just pull him back a bit, now that our lens is a bit longer, and then we can just dial it in. See how it's going to look a little bit blobby here. It's because we put our samples down really low before. So if we just put that back up, so let's go 1024. And the denoiser as well, I usually like to not denoise it in here because we can actually put that in the render itself. So we don't want to double denoise. We just want to have a single denoise and have full control over it in the render settings. So we'll just crank that up. 2048. You see this bar is just chugging a little bit more now, but it's going to be a lot more accurate to what we want it to be looking like. Okay, so say we wanted to do somewhat of a turntable on this thing. That would be driven from in here. So add a keyframe to this. So say we wanted to make it do, you know, like a spin in the transform down here. So if we go down to rotation, what we just need to do is set a keyframe on where we want it to start and where we want it to finish. So let's say on keyframe 0, we can click on yaw, hit enter, which is where the keyframe, and then however long we want the spin to go for. So say we're doing 30 frames a second. So say we wanted to go for 5 seconds. Yeah, let's do less. Let's do it for 3 seconds. Just hit enter there. Now you can see our difference, which is going to be nothing because they're exactly the same. So if we just spin this guy 360 and we'll hit enter. So this has automatic ease in and out on it, which we don't want. So if you want to say this, you want this to be looping on your ArtStation or looping on any kind of video, see how it eases out? It's not going to have a smooth loop. So we can actually change that by hitting this graph here. We've got yours selected. We can see those 2 keyframes and you can see the nice ease in and out that it's got, which is great for some cases, but in our case, we don't want that. So if you just highlight the keyframe and then hit this linear interpolation here, same thing, cool. And now we can jump out of curves. And now you'll see it's just a nice rotation with no ease in and out on it. Okay, so now we're ready to set up a render and we can shoot some stuff out. I just noticed though in this project, I actually don't have movie render queue enabled, which is fine. We can get that enabled. So if we just go up to edit down to plugins and type in movie render queue, cool, and additional passes. And it's gonna ask us to restart. So we're gonna restart that. Okay, now that that's restarted, when we hit our little clapper down here, which is the thing we're going to be using to do our render, it's going to come up with a different window. So in here, what we want to do is set up basically our render settings. So in here, we're not going to use JPEG. You can actually just click on these and click delete. So let's go through and let's do an EXR sequence. Deferred rendering is not what we want because we're going to be doing path tracing. So we can get rid of deferred and go down to path tracer. A couple of extra settings, anti-aliasing. This is where we're going to be sorting out our samples for when we are using our path tracer. Let's just do those few for now. We're going to anti-aliasing. So what we want to do is these 2 numbers multiply by each other. So spatial sample count is usually going to be less than this one here. Let's try something like 16 by 64. And then what we want to do is override. That's what this thing here is saying. Hey, wait, what's going on? And in case you forget it says it here, you know, it has a bigger and smaller, and then these 2 multiply by each other equal in amount. So we'll just override that. And then our output is obviously wherever you want to output it to. If you want to be 100% sure of the range that you're going to be using. So like in our case, we know that it's exactly 90 frames and our frame range is at 150, which we could go back and change it in here and put it to there and it's going to do the same thing. Or you could do custom playback range. So you could go and put it in there like that. And then we'll just hit accept. We can save our config settings here in case we ever want to go back to it. Save as a preset. Let's go render 1 settings. Cool, accept. So now whenever we're going to render our render 1 level and sequence, we'll know that these are our settings for that. Cool, and then we can just hit render local. You can already see there, it's got our 90 frames. And this is it rendering all of those samples per frame. So this is our 16 by 64, which is enter equaling 1024. And we'll just let that go through and see how it goes out on the other end. So this is the final renders and you can see it looping halfway through, which is the way we turn the ease off. And you can see it loops seamlessly. So that's the end of the series. I just wanted to say a huge thanks to everyone for the support over the last few weeks. It's been really great seeing all your feedback and messages regarding your projects. As always, you can always hit me up on Discord or on ArtStation with any questions you might have, and I'd really love to see any projects that you did following this series or any recommendations for the next one. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See yous.